Welcome, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Literary Nonfiction and Personal Narrative Coaching Session. Thanks for joining me. First of all, I want to remind you that all of the sessions are saved on our Project Share page, and so you can go back at any time and observe any of the sessions that we have, grades 3, 4, and 5. There was something that you were thinking about or wanted to review, those are available to you. Make sure that you log in first to Project Share. You won't be able to see them if you don't log in. So log in and then you are welcome to the videos, and the files that we share with you are available there. We're going to be talking about literary nonfiction and personal narrative, but I also wanted to give you a heads up that the next session is going to be about nonfiction and prompt-based personal narrative. And we're going to have that also about 2 weeks before the session starts. You'll notice that we've gone from traditional literature, poetry, to literary nonfiction, and then into straight nonfiction. So you can kind of see how the curriculum is building so that students are getting a wide variety of reading. Here we go for literary nonfiction. Some things that we want you to remember. First of all, get your librarian involved. Before the unit starts, ask him or her to start pulling some books for you so that you can have them in your classroom and available for the students. Or if your students are visiting the library, maybe your librarian will take some time to introduce them to some of the literary nonfiction in the library. Also, please choose a read aloud and start before the unit starts so that you can start building their schema about literary nonfiction. So, as you're working on poetry right now, the poems go pretty fast. If you want to grab a literary nonfiction book and get going on that. Also, our adoption from Journeys has a ton of literary nonfiction in their leveled readers that you have students. Also, I wanted to let you know that in the social studies curriculum in iExplore, there are a ton of third grade biographies available to you. They're just little short selections um, that have a lot of great information about famous people and people that have made an impact in their lives. And so that's a great little resource for you also to get those. And you go to the social studies curriculum, click on district documents, and then there's a link called third grade biographies, and you'll find them there. Wanted just to call your attention to the TEKS for literary nonfiction, and it's that students understand, make inferences, and draw conclusions about the varied structural patterns and features of literary nonfiction. So I want you to make sure that you are helping students understand how the events of a person's life made them the person they are. So that's the big inference in that when they're starting to read those. Also, 3.9a says students are expected to explain the difference in point of view between biography and autobiography. So I wanted to remind you that you need to be teaching what point of view is and how it's told and how you figure it out, and then figure out author chose specific words and put them in a poem to get the message across. And now the author is writing this story a certain way, and let's figure out why they decided to write it this way. So please make sure that you're modeling that of how you explain it so they hear you doing it, and then get them talking to explain the text and comparisons between different kinds of point of view. As you plan for this unit and start teaching, please make sure that you're focusing on these skills and features, text features, the characteristics of literary nonfiction. Make sure you're determining the importance of events. Sometimes when you're reading literary nonfiction, something will happen in someone's life that's, maybe not very significant. Maybe there are other things that are very significant and kind of change the path of their life. Please help students to recognize those moments. Also, sequencing is very important because usually literary nonfiction is written in time sequence, so get them to notice that. Summary, again, always practicing summary, and media literacy, understanding why an author is putting in a timeline or why they are putting in a certain picture or a group of photographs. Also, please make sure your students can read. Leads us to some essential vocabulary that you need to make sure that you're teaching and modeling and making sure that your students can read these words and use them. So, literary, nonfiction versus fiction, so please make sure they understand the difference. In point of view, make sure they understand what is first person, what is third person, what is the all knowing narrator. So use those terms, have them read them, and understand what it's asking. The difference again between biography and autobiography, the word photograph is different from picture, so make sure they know that. Organization, so thinking about why a story is organized the way it is and being able to read that word. The word significant, and again, life lesson or theme or lesson, those kind of things. Please make sure that they understand those. Miss K is going to remind us of the cafe connection. Please remember, the lessons for cafe are not supposed to replace the unit of study mini lessons. You're supposed to be using them as mid-workshop teaching points or modeling in your read aloud. Um, when you start seeing wiggling during independent reading time or between switching your small groups during independent reading time, that's a perfect chance for you to do a quick cafe lesson in mid-workshop teaching. Being asked questions throughout the reading process. So as you're reading these literary nonfiction stories, you're asking yourself the basic why did they do this, but then the deeper questions of, how did this event change their life? Or why did they make this choice in their lifetime? Or how has this impacted me? You can also use the main idea and supporting details to determine importance. And again, go back to things that happen in a lifetime in the story. Why are they important? How are those details making significant impact in the person's life? I wanted to remind you about the genre connection book. In chapter 7, she talks about literary nonfiction. She goes more into biography and autobiography, but there's some great resources that you can use. You can play some music in your classroom that has that literary nonfiction. Coat of Many Colors from Dolly Parton, if you know that song, tells a story. Also, there are a ton of videos at biography.com that you can go in if your students are interested in reading about a person, make that connection with them. And then think about the art that you can call their attention to. Talk to your art teacher about self portraits that have been painted. We're going to switch to personal narrative writing. A couple things to remember. Telling those stories like Sigh. Um, Please remember to use quick writes. Give them that opportunity to have staying focused on one topic. Spell those sight words correctly. One of the things that we're noticing when we're working with fourth grade is that we need to make sure that those fourth graders are coming in being able to spell sight words correctly. So we really need you to be stressing that in your writing instruction. Also, I want to remind you that oral rehearsal is a key. You've got to get those third graders telling their stories to their partners before they're writing them down. So please make sure that that's a practice in your classroom, that you give them time. I also was in a classroom recently and had a teacher that was allowing their students to record themselves telling their story. So she had a laptop with a mic and let them record themselves telling the story. And then they got to go back and listen to themselves tell the story and were able to figure out what was significant, how they were staying on one topic. It was amazing. So that's just an opportunity for you maybe to integrate some technology into writing. I want to offer you some questions for thoughtful reflection about a memory. So, when after students are writing their personal narrative, this might be something that you create as a sentence stem for partners to talk about, or for you as the teacher to have a conversation in conferring, Or you could even offer this for students to kind of write a reflection after they've written their personal narrative. So some of the questions is, why did you pick this moment? What part of your personality has changed because of this moment? So how's your significant moments? Now, looking back, what do you see that you didn't see before? So maybe they would be able to add in a lesson learned at the end of their narrative. How did this moment help you become who you are now? So again, they can make that reflection and then possibly go back and add that to the end of their personal narrative. I want to remind you, with all the guys standing there, that everybody needs to be practicing their conventions. And so, some of the things that third grade needs to be focusing in right now are singular and plural noun usage. Please make sure that you are modeling it correctly and that they're using it correctly in their writing. Capitalizing and punctuating sentences correctly, capitalizing proper nouns, and that's titles of people, names of places, geography names, historical periods, different dates. We're working on writing a complete sentence. And again, they need modeling of that. So if you have your own writer's notebook and you're putting it under the document camera, you can show them and model them complete sentence with subject verb agreement. Also, I just want third grade teachers, I want to remind you to be on the lookout for the right source information that should be coming for you. We have that a great resource of how you can model and explain to students. All right, I want to thank you for joining me. And if you have any questions about literary nonfiction or personal narrative, please feel free to email me anytime. Our next session will be October 18th, and it'll be about nonfiction and prompt based personal narrative. Have a happy, happy, happy day.